I watched my wife cross the street with hurried steps, her hair blowing in the night breeze as she clutched the phone tightly to her chest. A strange man was waiting for her on the opposite sidewalk, leaning against a dark car, smiling as if he already knew that the night would end well for him. She looked around before crossing, but didn't look back. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at the home we shared. It was as if I didn't exist. As if everything we had built was just a shadow, a lie that she allowed herself to forget in that moment. My heart beat against my chest like a mismatched drum as I watched her smile at him, slide her hand over his arm as she had done before, as if it were part of a routine. A habit. A well-rehearsed betrayal. The hotel was just a few meters away. I followed them at a distance, feeling sweat running down the back of my neck, my fists clenched, my mind buzzing with a whirlwind of thoughts. I wanted to be wrong. I needed to be wrong. But then she stopped in front of the illuminated entrance, looked around once more and entered next to him. The doorman opened the door and smiled. The receptionist didn't hesitate when he took his card, as if he already knew them. I watched everything as if I were outside my own body. What does a man do when he sees the woman he loves giving herself into the arms of another? What goes on in the mind of a husband who realizes, in real time, that he has been betrayed, deceived, used? I felt angry. A fury so blind that my vision went dark for a moment. But I also felt something worse. Something more painful. An emptiness. As if everything I was, everything I had been, had lost its meaning. I didn't enter the hotel. I didn't make a fuss. I didn't scream his name. I didn't want to be that man who begs for answers he already knows. Instead, I went to my car and took out of the glove compartment an envelope that I had already prepared some time ago, without ever having had the courage to use. An envelope that contained everything needed to free her. To set me free. A decision made before I even knew I would have to make it. I wrote my name on the envelope in firm handwriting, as if each letter was a blow to the pain burning inside me. I walked to the hotel reception and handed it to the attendant. "Their room," I ordered, my voice colder than I expected. He hesitated for a moment, but didn't question it. Nightlife professionals see it all. Few care. I went up to the parking lot, opened my car door and sat in the driver's seat, waiting. I don't know how much time passed, but I was there when the elevator door opened and I saw a hotel employee walk down the hallway toward the room where my wife and that man were. I wanted to see the reaction. I wanted to witness the exact moment when the truth would strike them like a bolt of lightning across the sky. The bedroom door opened. The envelope was delivered. Seconds later, a shadow appeared in the window, her figure standing still in shock. Minutes later, the door opened wide and the two appeared in the hallway, confusion written on their faces. She held the envelope as if it were a bomb about to explode. And, in a way, it was. He said something to her. She looked at him as if she only now realized where she was. As if he only now understood what he had done. I smiled. Not because I was happy. But because, at that moment, I knew. I knew nothing in the world could undo that scene. I knew she would never look at me the same way again. And what I didn't know, at that moment, was that the worst was yet to come. Welcome to the channel. Here, betrayal will never be romanticized or justified. The stories you will hear are fictional, but the pain, consequences and twists and turns are based on the harsh reality of those who have lived through this nightmare. The objective is clear, to show how betrayal destroys lives, corrodes relationships and leaves marks that will never be erased. Get ready for an intense story, full of emotions and twists that will keep you hooked from beginning to end. Take a deep breath, because what comes next will surprise you. The clock on the wall said 6:47 p.m. when Daniel parked the car in the garage at home. Fatigue weighed heavily on his shoulders after a long day at the office, but the mere thought of walking in and meeting Sophia made him forget about any exhaustion. It had always been like this. From the first date, from the first kiss. He used to tell himself that he was a lucky man to have found a woman like her, and, in a way, he never stopped believing that. Sophia was the kind of person who effortlessly lit up a room, who smiled easily, who knew exactly what to say to make any moment lighter. When they met, he fell in love with her spontaneity, her simple way of transforming routine into something special. He believed that they had built a solid relationship together, resistant to time and adversity, but lately something seemed different. Little details he tried to ignore, as if avoiding looking at them would make them disappear. Upon entering, he found the house silent, which was unexpected. Usually, Sophia liked to play ambient music while she was preparing dinner or watching something on TV. This time, the only sound filling the space was the distant echo of his own footsteps on the wooden floor. He called out to her, but his voice was met only by emptiness. He walked to the kitchen, where he found a half-empty glass of wine on the counter and a plate with untouched leftover food next to it. He felt a strange discomfort in his chest, a subtle but deep heaviness. Still holding her work bag, she turned towards the living room, where the curtains were partially open, revealing the already dark sky outside. It was then that the bedroom door opened and Sophia appeared, with slightly messy hair and an expression that he couldn't immediately decipher. She smiled, a small, almost mechanical smile, as if she were distracted. He said he had taken a nap, that the day had been tiring and that he hadn't noticed how much time had passed. Daniel watched her for a few seconds before nodding, forcing a smile back. He didn't want to show his discomfort, nor question why the feeling of distance between them seemed to grow every day. Instead, he walked over and pulled her into a hug. The smell of her perfume, soft and familiar, enveloped him, and for a moment he closed his eyes, wanting to believe that everything was okay, that maybe it was just his imagination, that nothing had really changed. But there was something different about Sophia. Something he couldn't name. Small gestures, averted glances, two short answers. Before, she used to sit next to him on the couch and tell him banal details about her day, about what she read, about the plans she wanted to make for the weekend. Now, she always seemed distracted, always with her mind somewhere else. Daniel tried to convince himself that it was just tiredness, that the routine was taking a toll on both of them. But deep down, a growing restlessness was beginning to take place inside him, an uncomfortable, suffocating feeling, like a shadow creeping across the walls of what was once a safe home. He was never a jealous man. He always trusted Sophia without reservations. But trust is a fragile thing when you start to notice cracks that weren't there before. The excuses for arriving late, the meetings with friends he never saw, the messages answered too quickly, but always accompanied by a furtive glance at the cell phone screen before blocking it. Small details that, alone, meant nothing, but together they began to form a picture that Daniel didn't want to see. That night, as Sophia slept beside him, he lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, his thoughts too restless to allow him to fall asleep. He remembered when he met her, how easy everything seemed between them. From the first months of marriage, when they laughed at anything, when they made plans for the future without fear. Time shouldn't have changed that. Love should not be eroded by everyday life. So why did he feel like something was slipping through his fingers? The next morning, when he woke up, he found the bed next to him empty. The bathroom was silent, the curtains already drawn to the side. Sophia was in the kitchen, drinking coffee and sliding her fingers across her cell phone screen, a slight smile on the corner of her lips. He stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her, trying to understand what was going through her mind. When she noticed his presence, she quickly locked the screen and looked up. "Good morning, love," she said, as if nothing was out of the ordinary. But for Daniel, everything seemed different. The following days followed this same strange routine. Sophia increasingly distant. He became more and more stuck with a feeling that something was wrong, but without concrete evidence to justify his uneasiness. Work no longer held his attention as before, his friends began to notice his distraction. The thought of questioning her tormented him. What if he was mistaken? What if it was all just paranoia? But what if it wasn't? One Friday night, after leaving the office early, Daniel decided to do something he never imagined he would need to do. He picked up the phone and called one of Sophia's closest friends, a woman he knew would never lie to protect her. She made it seem like a casual conversation, asking how they were, if they had gone out together that week. The response he received made his stomach sink. "Sophia? No, we haven't seen each other in weeks, she's been so busy. I thought she was with you." That night, he couldn't face her the same way. Every word exchanged between them seemed rehearsed, every look from Sophia carried something he couldn't decipher. But Daniel knew. Deep down, I already knew. The following Sunday, as she left once again claiming a last-minute appointment, he decided to follow her. Not because I wanted confirmation, but because I needed it. I needed to know the truth, no matter how much it hurt. What he found that night would change his life forever. Daniel stood still for a moment, looking at his cell phone screen as if waiting for the message to change before his eyes. Sophia had just left home, saying she would meet a friend for a casual dinner, but the truth had already been thrust before him in a raw and irreversible way. The friend she said she was meeting didn't know anything. He felt a wave of heat rise through his body, mixed with a chill down his spine that made him wonder how the hell he had gotten to this point. How had I not noticed before? How had he not seen the obvious signs, the moments when she avoided his eyes, the rush to hide the phone, the empty excuses that seemed to multiply? Everything was there, in front of him all the time, but the love, the trust, or perhaps the simple refusal to accept reality, blinded him. The front door was still ajar. He took a deep breath, trying to contain the storm within him. There was only one way to know the truth. He took the car keys, got out without thinking twice and got into the vehicle with his fingers gripping the steering wheel tightly. His heart was pounding in his chest in a way he didn't remember ever feeling before. Sophia's car disappeared into the distance, and without hesitation, he followed its trail, keeping a safe distance. The journey took longer than he expected. It wasn't the way to the restaurant she mentioned. It was an unfamiliar route, as if she had taken every precaution to avoid being discovered. They passed through busy avenues, then through quieter streets, until finally she parked in front of a discreet hotel, with a dark facade, without flashy signs. It was one of those places that didn't want to attract attention, that seemed to exist only for those who needed to hide. Daniel parked a little further away, staying inside the car as he watched Sophia get out of the vehicle, fixing her hair as if to make sure she looked perfect. It was only when a man appeared at the hotel entrance that her stomach turned violently. He didn't know him. I had never seen him before. But the way Sophia smiled when she saw him, the way she walked up to him and touched his arm with the intimacy of someone who has done this many times, made something inside Daniel crumble. All he wanted was to be wrong. Having followed his wife only to be ashamed of his own paranoia, to go home and laugh at the stupidity of his suspicions. But there she was, in front of him, in the arms of another man. What came next was even worse. He saw her intertwine her fingers with his, look at him with that sparkle in her eyes that, one day, was just for him. He saw her leaning over to whisper something in the other's ear, while he laughed softly, pulling her by the waist into the hotel. The door closed behind them. Daniel remained there, immobilized. His chest rose and fell with irregular breaths, his hands shook on the steering wheel, his knuckles white from squeezing so much. Anger came and went in waves, beating against disbelief, against the absurd pain that rose inside him like a choked scream. It wasn't just the suit that Sophia was cheating on him about. It was the ease with which he did it, the naturalness of the gesture, as if it were something commonplace. As if the guilt didn't exist, as if he had never been an essential part of her life. He closed his eyes for a moment, feeling his head throbbing. I couldn't lose control. I couldn't just walk through those doors and demand explanations that, deep down, I already knew what they would be. So he picked up the phone, accessed the documents that he had prepared some time ago, just in case, but that he had never had the courage to sign. Now it was different. Now everything made sense. He wrote a quick note, attached the paperwork and called the hotel reception. His voice sounded surprisingly calm when he asked for the letter to be delivered to the room where Sophia and that man had just gone upstairs. The receptionist hesitated, but after a moment he agreed. Daniel watched as the employee took the envelope and walked away, disappearing into the building. So he waited. Time seemed to pass in a strange way, dragging and at the same time too fast. His heart was beating loudly in his ears, his thoughts were pounding in his mind without letting up. What if she lied when confronted? What if he pretended to be sorry? What if she told him she still loved him, that it didn't mean anything? He knew all those words would be false, but what really hurt was the fact that, for a while, he would have believed them. Then, the bedroom door opened. From where he was, Daniel saw Sophia appear in the hallway, holding the envelope as if it were poison about to flow through her fingers. The man came out right behind her, looking around as if waiting for someone to appear and explain what was happening. She opened the paper with shaking hands, her eyes scanning the words written there. And it was at that moment that he saw it. Her expression changed. The color drained from his face, his lips parted in mute shock, as his eyes ran line by line, taking in the truth that was now impossible to ignore. The man next to her said something, trying to understand what was happening, but she didn't respond. His eyes just lifted to stare at the empty hallway, as if he had just finally realized what he had done. Daniel continued to watch, without moving. The exact moment she knew it was all over, that there were no more excuses, that there were no more lies that could save her. The silence that followed was deafening. But there was something that neither she nor that man knew yet. Something that would make everything even worse. Something that would completely change the course of everything. And when the time came, the truth would come as an impossible blow to avoid. The silence in the hallway was overwhelming. Sophia still held the envelope between her fingers, the paper shaking slightly, her gaze fixed on the words that seemed to eat away at her soul with each passing second. The man next to her, until then lost in the confusion, leaned over to peer at the contents of the letter, but she instinctively pulled the paper against her chest, as if she were holding something that, at that moment, had more weight than anything else in her life. Daniel continued to watch from afar, motionless, watching every slightest reaction unfold like a movie where he already knew the ending. She brought her other hand to her mouth, her face pale, her eyes blinking too quickly, as if she were trying to process everything at once. The man impatiently placed a hand on her shoulder and whispered something, but Sophia didn't react. He just took a deep breath, with an expression filled with something that Daniel didn't completely recognize. It wasn't just guilt. It was fear. A fear that sent a shiver down his back. Then, she looked up and looked around, as if aware that she was being watched. It didn't take long for her eyes to meet his, parked across the street, inside the car, staring at her without any expression. At that moment, something broke inside her. His mouth opened slightly, his lips parting in a silent gasp as genuine panic took over his face. She took a step back, and then, with almost desperate haste, turned to the man beside her, holding his arm tightly. He whispered something that Daniel couldn't hear, but which made the other frown, confused. The man backed away slightly, trying to understand what was happening, but Sophia was no longer paying attention to him. She pulled her phone out of her pocket, her fingers hesitant as she typed, probably to Daniel. But he didn't need any more words. I didn't need any more lies. He already had all the answers in front of him. When she realized he wouldn't answer, she tried to cross the street. Daniel's instinct was to open the door and leave, but his muscles were locked. His chest rose and fell with rapid breathing, blood pounding in his ears, his mind oscillating between fury and complete disbelief. And then, finally, he saw it. The man stepped forward, touching Sophia's shoulder to stop her from going, and that's when Daniel noticed. The way he held her arm, the way he looked at her, the tone in which he said something that made her hesitate for a moment. Time seemed to slow down at that moment. The pieces began to fit together, forming a picture he hadn't considered before. Daniel's stomach lurched violently when he realized. The man was not just any stranger. His wife's lover was an old acquaintance, someone he would never have imagined being involved in this story. The man who was next to Sophia, inside that hotel, was a former partner of Daniel. A man who, years before, he had trusted blindly. Someone he had called a friend. The revelation hit Daniel like a physical blow. His body stiffened, the air seemed to lack for an instant. The past returned with force, dragging with it memories he had tried to bury. He and that man had worked together for years, built projects side by side, shared ideas, strategies. Until the day everything fell apart. There was a reason that man was no longer in her life. A reason that Sophia knew very well. Daniel remembered the betrayal he had suffered years before, but not in a relationship. In the business world. His former partner had embezzled money, used privileged information for his own benefit, destroying the trust that existed between them. Daniel, in the past, fought to expose the truth, to save his reputation and clear his name from the consequences that almost ruined him. In the end, he succeeded, but the price was high. The price was to cut any ties, bury any possibility of reconciliation. And now, here he was. With Sophia. Daniel's eyes returned to her, still trying to cross the street, still trying to get closer. Her face carried a despair he had never seen before. But now he understood everything. I understood why she always looked away when the subject came up. I understood why there had been so much hesitation in his words these past few months. It wasn't just marital betrayal. It was something much deeper. She knew what that man meant to Daniel. I knew what he had done. And yet, she chose to be with him. Daniel's chest burned, a mixture of fury and a deep sense of humiliation. How could she? How did he have the audacity to get involved with the very person who, years before, tried to destroy him? Sophia finally got close to the car and rapped on the window with her knuckles. Daniel didn't react immediately. He just looked at her, studying every detail of her expression. She opened her mouth, but her voice wavered. He then slowly rolled down the window. The air between the two was heavy, filled with a tension that was impossible to ignore. Her eyes were teary, her hands were shaking slightly. But what caught his attention the most was the terror. She whispered his name, her voice almost pleading. Daniel remained motionless, waiting. She tried to speak, but hesitated. I knew that any word said at that moment would sound insignificant. He finally broke the silence. He said just one sentence, a single sentence that caused the rest of the color to drain from her face. You knew who he was all along. Sophia closed her eyes, and there it was. The confirmation he needed. The betrayal wasn't just physical. It was emotional. It was planned. It was unforgivable. The silence that formed between the two was almost as heavy as the air itself. The half-open glass separated two completely different realities. On one side, Sophia, with her eyes moist, her breathing ragged, her body curled up as if every fiber of her was begging for a chance to fix something irreparable. On the other, Daniel, cold, motionless, feeling the distance between them growing with each passing second. Time seemed to drag by before Sophia found the strength to try to speak. His lower lip trembled slightly as his hands tightened around his own arms, as if trying to protect himself from something invisible. I didn't want it to be like this. Her voice was low, filled with hesitation. But Daniel didn't look away. She knew exactly what she had done. He didn't need to listen to empty justifications. But it was. His response was cutting, without hesitation, without any space for her to try to hold on to any crumb of hope. It wasn't like that. It wasn't what you think. You knew who he was. The accusation hovered between them like a dull blow. Sophia closed her eyes for a moment, as if the truth was weighing heavily on her shoulders. Yes. The confession came out in a whisper. It was at that moment that Daniel finally moved, leaning slightly forward, as if he wanted to extract from her every detail, every lie, every wrong choice that led her here. So tell me, why? She swallowed hard, her fingers tightening around her own wrist, as if that would stop her body from shaking. At first, I didn't even know how it all started. It wasn't about you. It wasn't meant to hurt you. Daniel laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. Wasn't it about me? So explain to me, Sophia, why everything I see now is exactly about me. She rubbed her face with both hands, as if trying to reorganize her own thoughts, find a way to make him understand something that even she herself didn't seem to understand. I met him by chance. He showed up at a meeting I went to with a friend, and I didn't even know who he was until he told me. And yet you continued. She nodded slightly, but then shook her head, frustrated with her own answer. I don't know how to explain this to you. I know it seems unforgivable, that there is no justification, but I didn't plan any of this. It just happened. Daniel narrowed his eyes, analyzing every nuance of her face, every trace of despair, of guilt, of regret. But it wasn't enough. You betrayed me, Sophia. But it wasn't just that. You chose him. Among all the people in the world, you chose the one who tried to destroy me once. This was not a mistake. That was a decision. She closed her eyes tightly, as if those words were physically painful. I was lost. I was confused. So why didn't you talk to me? Why didn't you tell me anything? Because I knew that if I spoke, I would have to face what I was doing. He was silent for a moment. Sophia sobbed softly, putting her hands to her face, and Daniel noticed that she was shaking. But none of that changed what had already been done. You don't understand. He showed up and made me question things I thought were right. He spoke of you as someone who had seen you at your worst. He talked about his ambition, his choices, his failures. Daniel's eyes flashed with something close to hatred. And you heard. You believed him. Sophia shook her head, her voice cracking. I tried not to believe it. I tried not to get involved. But when I realized it, it was already too deep. The confession was like a final blow. You didn't try anything, Sophia. You allowed yourself. She started to cry for real now, her shoulders shaking, the sobs escaping, but Daniel didn't move a muscle. He felt strange, numb, as if something inside him had finally shut down. Tell me something. His voice was lower, firmer. Did you ever think about stopping? She hesitated. And her silence alone was an answer. I thought, but I couldn't. Daniel nodded, as if that were the last missing piece. Then everything is already resolved. Sophia's eyes widened, panic returning to the surface. No. Daniel, please. It's not like that. I love you. He laughed again, an empty laugh. You love me? She nodded frantically. Yes. I know I screwed up, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I love you. Did you love me while you were in the hotel room with him? Sophia sobbed, unable to respond. Daniel opened the car door and got out, stopping right in front of her. You ended everything. And I'm not a man who's going to try to fix that anymore. She grabbed his arm, eyes wide, desperate. Daniel, don't leave me like this. I made a mistake, I know I made a mistake, but we have a story. We have years together. He looked at her, and for the first time in his life, he felt absolutely nothing for her. We had. He pulled away from her touch and started to walk away. Sophia stood there, motionless, her eyes full of tears, her face pale, not knowing what to do. And then, he stopped, turned slightly, and said the last thing he needed to say. Whatever you tried to find in him, I hope it was worth it. Because now, you're alone. He turned and walked away. And this time, Sophia knew there was no going back. Daniel walked to his car without looking back, feeling each step as if it were heavier than the last. The night wind blew against his face, but the cold he felt didn't come from the temperature. It was something deeper, something that seemed to have lodged itself in his chest like a thin, cutting blade, a silent, constant pain that wouldn't go away anytime soon. He opened the door and sat down, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly, as if it could contain the storm raging inside him. Outside, he could still see Sophia standing where he had left her, her body rigid, her eyes fixed on him, but he could no longer care. She seemed a shadow of her former self, a woman he thought he knew but who was now just a meaningless name. He turned the key in the ignition and drove off without hesitation. The sound of the engine filled the silence, but it didn't drown out the thoughts swirling in his mind. Everything he had built with her was now reduced to ashes. Years of companionship, of trust, of shared sacrifices, of laughter that previously seemed sincere. How did that happen? How could someone who had been by his side for so long be able to destroy him like this? He couldn't understand, and deep down he knew he never would. Some things simply have no explanation. Some pain cannot be rationalized. He drove aimlessly, just feeling the asphalt under his tires, letting the road take his mind to any place other than that scene, that hotel, that regretful face that now meant nothing. He should feel angry, and in a way he did. But what hurt most was not the betrayal itself, but her choice. Out of everyone, out of anyone who could have been, she chose someone who had tried to destroy him in the past. A man who knew his story, his struggles, who tried to pull the rug out from under him when he needed support most. She knew everything and yet she allowed it to happen. This wasn't just infidelity. It was something worse. The car slowed down until, without realizing it, Daniel parked in front of the building where his best friend lived. It was the only place he could go at that moment, the only person who could listen to everything without judging him, without trying to minimize his pain with empty words of comfort. He got out of the car and walked up the stairs with firm steps. He knocked on the door a few times, and it didn't take long for him to be answered. As soon as the door opened, his friend's eyes widened, immediately noticing that something was wrong. What happened? Daniel walked past him without responding immediately, walked into the living room and let out a heavy sigh before finally finding the words. Sophia betrayed me. The silence that came after was almost as heavy as what he felt when he saw it with his own eyes. His friend closed the door behind him and walked towards him, not knowing exactly what to say. What? Daniel ran his hands over his face, trying to organize his thoughts, but everything seemed like a blur. I followed her today. She said she was going out with a friend, but that wasn't it. She was with someone. At the hotel. His friend frowned, sitting down next to him. Man, I don't know what to say. There's nothing to say. There's nothing that's going to change that. Another silence. He was tired, exhausted from it all, from every emotion that weighed on his shoulders. But I needed to talk. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was with him. His friend's eyes narrowed in confusion for a moment, until realization hit him like a blow. It can't be. Daniel let out a humorless laugh. He can. And it was. His friend sat back on the couch, too shocked to respond right away. Did she know? I always knew. Indignation grew in the other's eyes. This is unbelievable. But it happened. Another silence followed, but this time it was different. It wasn't just pain or anger that hung in the air, it was the weight of reality, of what couldn't be undone. And now? What are you going to do? Daniel ran his tongue over his dry lips, looking straight ahead as if the answer was there, stamped on the walls of that apartment. I don't know. But I know what I won't do. His friend nodded, understanding without having to explain. You won't forgive her. Daniel looked at him and shook his head. Never. And in that moment, he knew his life was about to change forever. There was nothing more to be said. Sophia had made her choice. Now, he would do his. Daniel didn't come home that night. After leaving his friend's apartment, he drove for hours, without a clear destination, just letting the movement of the road ease the crushing weight he was carrying. The city was still alive, lights twinkled on lonely streetlights, cars rushed past him, but to him, everything seemed distant, as if he were isolated within an invisible bubble. The clock on the car's dashboard read almost 3 in the morning when he finally decided to stop. The place where he parked was an old cafe he used to frequent years ago, before he even met Sophia. A place where he used to sit and plan his future, when everything was still a land of infinite possibilities. He got out of the car, feeling the early morning cold cut into his skin, and entered the almost empty establishment. Just an attendant behind the counter and a couple in the corner, immersed in a silent conversation. He sat down, ordered a strong coffee, and stood there, watching the smoke rise from the cup as his mind tried to decipher how to move forward. Every part of him wanted to take away that pain, to get rid of the memory of Sophia, the betrayal, the bitter taste of having been deceived so deeply. But forgetting was not something that could happen immediately. The love he once felt for her couldn't just disappear from one moment to the next, even if it was tainted by disappointment. He felt his cell phone vibrate in his jacket pocket. He took the device, without rushing, already imagining who it could be. Her name flashed on the screen. Sophie. He watched the phone ring for a few moments before pressing to ignore the call. Minutes later, a message appeared. Please let me talk to you. I need to explain. He let out a long sigh, feeling an exhaustion that wasn't just physical. A second message arrived. I know I have no right to ask for anything, but I can't accept it ending like this. I need you to listen to me. Just once. Daniel ran his fingers over his face, as if that could remove the tension that was accumulating on his forehead. He knew that, at some point, he would need to face her. But not now. Not while every word she said only served to reinforce everything that was already destroyed. The coffee cooled before him, untouched. The attendant looked in his direction, as if he wanted to ask if he wanted another cup, but something in Daniel's expression made him give up. He got up, paid the bill and left the cafe. The sky was beginning to lighten slightly on the horizon, a sign that dawn was already giving way to day. He would need to make a decision about what came next. He decided he wouldn't go home anytime soon. The apartment he shared with Sophia was no longer a home. It was just a place filled with memories he wanted to erase. He picked up his cell phone and made a quick call. Your friend answered on the second ring. I need a favor. The voice on the other end didn't hesitate. It says. Can I stay at your apartment for a while? Until I sort some things out. Dude, you didn't even have to ask. Of course you can. Come here now. Daniel nodded, even though he knew his friend couldn't see him. Thanks. He drove there slowly, feeling a momentary relief knowing that he wouldn't have to go home and face Sophia anytime soon. When he arrived, his friend was already waiting for him at the door, arms crossed, evaluating him with a worried look. You look like shit. Daniel let out a short, humorless laugh. And I feel worse. He entered and threw the keys on the living room table. The apartment was silent, except for the low sound of the television turned on to some channel. She sat on the couch, feeling the weight of tiredness spread throughout her body. His friend sat next to him, saying nothing for a moment. He just watched Daniel, waiting for him to speak first. She sent me messages. The other side, crossing his arms. And you responded? No, good. And do you intend to respond? Daniel ran his hand over the back of his neck, feeling the tension built up in his muscles. I don't know. Part of me wants to hear what she has to say. Another part, he doesn't want to hear her voice ever again. His friend nodded, understanding. I understand. But you already know everything you need to know. There's nothing more she can say that will change the facts. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, feeling a stab of pain in his chest. But what if I need to hear it? Not to change anything, but to get it over with. His friend studied his face for a few moments before responding. If you think you need it, then do it. But it does it for you. Not for her. Daniel nodded slowly, absorbing those words. Time passed slowly that morning. He sat on the couch, lost in thought, as the day progressed. Every few minutes, I would pick up my phone, look at her messages, and block any urge to respond. Until, finally, he made a decision. He got up, grabbed his car keys and walked to the door. His friend raised an eyebrow. What are you going to do? Daniel took a deep breath before responding. Finish this. In truth. He left the apartment without waiting for a response. He drove to the apartment where he lived with Sophia. He didn't say he was going. He just continued there, knowing that this time would be the last. When he arrived, he hesitated for a moment at the door. He took a deep breath and turned the knob. Sophia was in the living room, sitting on the sofa, looking lost. When she saw him enter, she immediately stood up, her eyes wide, her breath catching in her throat. Daniel. He closed the door behind him, staring at her leisurely. You wanted to talk. Then speak. Sophia hesitated, as if she didn't know where to start. I don't know what to say first. He crossed his arms. Then start from the beginning. She took a deep breath and tried to find the words. I know I hurt you in a way that can't be fixed. I know nothing I say now will change what I did. But I didn't want it to end like this. Daniel kept his gaze fixed on her. What do you want, Sophia? She blinked, surprised by the direct question. I don't know. I just wanted you to listen to me. He let out a dry laugh. Then speak. She hesitated again, and when she finally began to speak, her voice was low, almost pleading. I didn't fall in love with him. It wasn't about that. It was a mistake, a moment of weakness. Daniel narrowed his eyes. One moment. Do you think I'm stupid? This was not a slip. It was a repeated choice. She trembled slightly. I got lost on the way. But I still love you. He stared at her for a long moment, evaluating every expression, every gesture. And then, he sighed. I don't love you anymore. Sophia seemed to be struck by a blow. Daniel. But he was already walking to the door. It's over, Sophia. And this time, there is no going back. And he left, without looking back. Daniel walked out of the apartment as if he was leaving a gigantic weight behind. The door closed behind him, and with that, any trace of doubt disappeared. There was nothing left there for him. The air felt lighter, as if, for the first time in a long time, he could breathe without feeling that suffocating tightness in his chest. He went down the stairs, crossed the parking lot and got into his car. He started the engine, but it didn't start immediately. His hands rested on the steering wheel, and for the first time since discovering the betrayal, he felt something different. Freedom. Not the bitter freedom of those who lose something against their will, but that of those who decide to start over, of those who allow themselves to continue without carrying a dead weight on their shoulders. He had been betrayed, humiliated, deceived, but not destroyed. He was still there. It was still him. And now, more than ever, he knew that nothing could stop him. As he drove, he felt his phone vibrate in his pocket, but he didn't need to look to know who it was. Sophie. Ignored. From now on, she was no longer part of his life. The past would stay where it belonged, behind. The sun was beginning to set over the horizon, staining the sky with orange and pink tones, and, for the first time in a long time, Daniel felt genuine peace. Nothing else mattered. He didn't need explanations, empty justifications, or promises that would never be fulfilled. What had been done could not be undone, and he was at peace with that. On the other side of the city, Sophia remained sitting on the sofa, her face pale, her eyes fixed on the door through which Daniel left. Her short, shaky breaths betrayed the despair that took hold of her. She lost it. For the first time, reality hit her with an unbearable weight. There were no more excuses, no more second chances, no more time to reverse what he did. She always believed that no matter what happened, Daniel would be there. But now it wasn't. And never would be again. His chest rose and fell in a rhythmic rhythm, while the silence of the house seemed to echo cruelly around him. He picked up his phone and typed another message, but deleted it before sending it. It was no use. He wouldn't answer. Days passed and, for the first time, Sophia felt what it was like to truly be alone. The apartment, previously shared, became an empty and suffocating space. The memories were everywhere, but what hurt most was the silence. No message from Daniel, no connection, nothing. He had disappeared from her life as if he had never existed. She tried to follow her routine, but everything felt like a constant reminder of what she had lost. At work, colleagues noticed his change, his empty look, his lack of enthusiasm. She was no longer the confident, vibrant woman she used to be. She had become a shadow of herself, carrying the weight of the consequences of her own choices. As for the man she risked everything for, he too has disappeared. What once seemed like an adrenaline-filled affair turned into something pointless, meaningless. When she realized that Daniel would never forgive her, the lover simply moved on, without remorse, without concern, as if nothing had happened. He was never there for her. It was never love. Just a temporary distraction. And now, there was no one left. While Sophia sank into the void of her own guilt, Daniel rebuilt his life. It wasn't easy at the beginning. He had to face every bit of the pain he carried, he had to accept that his world had fallen apart, but he also realized that the fall was not the end. Little by little, he began to find pieces of himself that he had lost over the years. He refocused on his career, rediscovered hobbies he had abandoned, reconnected with old friends. For the first time, he felt he could move on without carrying the weight of betrayal. And it was then that, unexpectedly, he met someone. I wasn't looking, I didn't think I was ready, but life has strange ways of surprising you. It was a casual meeting, without expectations, without promises, but unlike anything you had experienced before. Her laugh was genuine, her gaze sincere, and, for the first time since everything that had happened, Daniel allowed himself to imagine a different future. Sophia found out about the new woman in Daniel's life weeks later. A mutual friend mentioned it, not realizing the impact it would have on her. She tried to pretend she didn't care, tried to smile and carry on the conversation, but inside, she felt her stomach turn. He was moving on. And her? I was still stuck in the past, reliving every mistake, every wrong choice, every moment that I could never change. The months passed, and fate meant that one day, without warning, Sophia and Daniel crossed paths again. It was a brief meeting, in a coffee shop, where he was accompanied. She saw him first. He smiled and gestured as he spoke, with the light expression of someone who had finally found peace. He looked happy. Really happy. And that hurt more than anything. When their eyes met, Daniel just nodded slightly, a gesture of recognition, but without any trace of emotion. To him, she was nothing more than someone who was part of the past, nothing more. Sophia forced a smile and looked away, trying to pretend that that moment didn't destroy her inside. But deep down, she knew. Lost Daniel forever. And that would be his biggest punishment. And so, life went on. Daniel found the happiness he thought he would never have again. Sophia, on the other hand, would live the rest of her days trapped in the memory of the man she destroyed with her own hands. Now, I want to hear from you. What did you think of this story? Comment your opinion below and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Remember, betrayal never leads to anything but regret and loneliness. Until next time.